Great. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to No Code North and the Lodge. We are here today to learn about building apps with Glide and connecting them to our Webflow builds. And to do that, we have a Glide maybe not quite an original, but certainly somebody who's pretty important at Glide, Andy Claremont, head of ecosystem and community. So I'm going to let Andy sort of take it away from here, and let's all learn how to build in Glide.
All right, thanks, Penny. Hey, everybody. So as Penny mentioned, I'm Andy. I look after community and ecosystem at Glide. If you're not familiar with us, we are a no-code development platform. You can think of it as like the way you use Webflow for building websites. You can use Glide for building stuff in the back end. I'm going to share my window here, and hopefully everything works. So before I get into the build, just want to give you a quick overview of Glide as a platform. So we started about 6 years ago now as a way to build mobile apps on top of Google Sheets. Since then, we've expanded quite a bit, including the number of data sources that we support, what you can do in Glide. But that focus has always really been about building custom apps, custom software for work. So if you want to go and build consumer apps or games or anything like that, we're not the platform for that, but we do have some very creative gliders who will push the limits of what's possible. So when you think about the type of things that you're going to build with Glide, portals, dashboards, CRMs, knowledge bases, inventory management tools, field tools, that sort of thing, those are kind of the ideal use cases for Glide. And the way we like to think of ourselves is being the platform that gives you those powers of being a developer and a designer without needing to know how to code or needing to know how to design. Everything in Glide starts with your data, and that's where we'll start when we get into our build. And then once you start pulling all your data together, we have an automated design system that allows you to drag and drop components that are all professionally designed. They adapt to any device. They make what you build look really, really good without you having to finesse with styling, CSS, anything like that. And then beyond that, integrations, lots of integrations and APIs. And we're going to be looking at that in today's workshop demo, specifically how do we connect Glide apps with the Webflow API to do some cool stuff. All right, so let's get over into the builder. And I am watching the YouTube chat as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in there and I'll try my best to jump on it. So this is the Glide dashboard. When you get into Glide for the first time, you'll be taken into a dashboard like this. You have your team switcher up at the top left. You can organize your apps into folders, your account settings up to the right here, and then all your team settings down to the left. When I create a new app, I have a few different choices. I can start from a template. So it could be a basic app. Maybe I want to use AI to generate something off of a prompt. I could import existing data or connect to an external data source. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to go with a blank app. All right, so here we are in the builder. I'll give you a quick little rundown here. Up at the top here, we have the name of our app, the team that we're in, the plan that we're on. This takes you back to the dashboard. Data, layout, and actions. You're going to be bouncing back and forth between these three areas all the time. There's the data editor, the layout editor, and the actions editor. Data editor, working with your data the way you would in, let's say, Airtable or other database management tools. The layout editor is where you're going to be building the interface of your app. And then actions is where you build your custom workflows. You have the settings screen here for reviewing all of your app settings. So for example, let's call this No Code North Suggestions. And I'm going to change the icon here. Let's see if I can do an inbox. There you go. And I'll make it orange because No Code North. I'll keep the rest of the settings the same. Privacy settings, I'm going to make this public because I want folks to be able to interact with this app. No sign-in required. I'll hit publish. change the name to No Code North Ideas. Hit the publish button, and that app is now live. So this is a really big part of Glide, is that we take care of everything. You don't need to worry about hosting, deployment, anything like that. We're handling it. So as soon as you get an app started, you can go and publish it immediately. So you could actually scan this QR code. I'm going to do that on my phone. And you can follow along if you're watching this. And you will see the app load on your device. Now, there's nothing there yet because we haven't put anything there yet, but we'll change that in a second. I'm also going to grab the app link. And drop that into the YouTube chat there. And you can follow along as we build. All right, so we have a published app running. We have it set up so that it is automatically publishing. So any changes that we make here will show up in production within a minute or so. We can toggle to publish manually if we want, but for these sorts of quick builds, it's not really necessary. So I'm going to go back to the data. We have, with a new blank app, we have 2 tables. We have this empty table, just a placeholder, and we have this users table. So the users table in Glide, the users table is really important because this controls who has access to your app. So if we did enable authentication, we wanted people to be able to log into the app. We could add them to the users table here. We can define roles for them. So for example, I'm going to give myself an admin role. And then as we're building, we can toggle between different users to preview what the app looks like as we build. And that's really important because as we build the app, what you see here in the preview in the middle is the actual app. It's not just like a snapshot. What you build is fully interactive. So let's start building here. So this empty table, I'm going to rename this to, let's call it suggestions. Name we'll keep, description we'll change that. Let's call this ideas. And I'm going to add another column here, just a basic column, be date and time. And we'll make it timestamp. And then here in the layout editor, I have this screen here. So over on the left-hand side, we have our screens. It's like the different tabs in your app, the components that will appear on the screen, and then the settings for either the screen itself or the different components on your screen. So what I want to do here is add a form that connects to the suggestions table that I just added. So I'm going to add a new component. You can see all the different components that you can choose from here. What I'm looking for is the form component. I can scroll and hunt it down, or I can just type in form. I'm going to add a form container. It's connected to the suggestions table. And it's preloaded some field components within that form container based on how our table is configured. So Glide looked at the table structure, said, hey, you have these columns. You probably want to populate those columns with your data as you're submitting the form. So let's add that. And it was a good guess, but I don't want folks to have to manually enter a timestamp, so I'm going to remove that. The name I'm going to leave as optional. Ideas, want to have a bit more space there. I'm going to make that one required. So if you want to submit ideas anonymously, you can do that. So if you're following along at home, you should see this show up on your device, or if you're on the computer, you should see it on the page. Now, as you're building, you get that full preview here. So I can see, what does this look like on a mobile device? What does it look like on a larger display? And then I can go full screen and interact with the app as I'm putting it together. and this is a really common experience as you're building with Glide, is that you are going to be using the app and building the app and iterating very, very quickly as you go through the experience. So let's get some suggestions in there. If you're following along, and anyone who is in the lodge right now, I need some participation. Go in, drop in some ideas for No Code North. It could just be some test submissions. Doesn't need to be anything major. I see a couple. There we go. I'm seeing the data coming in to the suggestions table. Let's get a couple more in there. Yeah, I'm going to submit one. Okay, we got a few. There we go. All right. Great. So we have these entries coming in, but we don't have the timestamp being populated. So how can we change that so that we get the timestamp added in there? So what I can do on the form container, you can see down here, it says after submit action. And by default, it just shows that notification that says, like, thank you. What we can do though is we can create a custom action workflow so that when someone submits a form, we do certain things. So I'm going to create a new action here. And it's going to be triggered when interact with the suggestions table. And the only thing that I'm going to do for this action is I want to add that timestamp. So how do I do that? When you add a step to a workflow, you have a bunch of different things that you can choose from. You could trigger a navigation interaction within the app itself. So for example, navigating between tabs or opening up a new form screen, that sort of thing. You can manipulate data. You can do those little interactions. So if you wanted to, for example, show a confirmation message, play a sound, you can chain those things together, just add a little bit of surprise and delight to your app. You can also do a bunch of communication stuff, like calling an API, which we'll see in a minute when we do the Webflow integration. And you can also interact with AI. So if you wanted to take an input and generate some text and do other things with it, these are all of the capabilities that you have within workflows in Glide. But we're keeping it simple with this demo. So I am just going to set column values. And what I'm going to do is in the timestamp column, I'm going to grab the current date and time. So these are dynamic values that Glide can auto insert into your data table. And I'm going to change the name of the action to new idea submission. Going back to the layout here. Actually, let me check on the data, see what we have. Okay, we got a bunch of tests. Great. So on the form container, I'm going to change the after submit action to new idea submission. And now if we look at the data, there's the timestamp. There's a really simple example there of one way to add interaction to forms in Glide, but you can bind interactions to other things as well. You can bind interactions to buttons that you add to your app screen, so that you're triggering different things. You can get really complex with all of the different things that you hook together. All right, last thing I'm going to show you here for this really quick test app is a collection component. So when we look at a table in Glide, oh, Jeremy, you may have needed to refresh your screen. You may have just gotten in there, may have been cached. So that is one thing to catch. So Jeremy submitted a form. We didn't get the timestamp. So what likely happened there is that Jeremy still had a cached version of the form on his screen, which does happen sometimes. Aha, okay. That's likely the same situation there. So this is actually a really good example of why you would want to switch over to the manual publishing. So if you do a bunch of work, you can then hit publish, and push the changes out. So I'm going to do that actually. I'm going to change the publishing method to manual. And then that's going to freeze the app where it is now. And then make some changes, and then we'll push the changes live. So let's add a collection component. Okay, so what I was saying before is that, there we go. There you go. There, we're getting the timestamps in. Awesome. All right, so when you're looking at a table, you can think of every single row in the table as a record. And one way to kind of delineate between different rows in a table is to add something that's called a row ID column. This is automatically generated by Glide, so you have a unique ID for every single entry in your table. Now, what I want to do on the layout is I want to make it possible for us to see these submissions in the app. So I'm going to add another component here. It's going to be a collection component. Specifically, I want to use a table component because this gives us a lot of flexibility for customizing the look and feel of the table and what's displayed. So I just added the table component. I'm going to change the source to suggestions. And there are all of our records. Now, what I can do here is I'm going to change this a little bit so that we have let's do name, make this ideas. That's cool. All right. Now I see there is an empty row in our table, and that's been or empty row in the suggestions table here. It has a row ID, so it is a valid row, but it doesn't have any values in it. So what I'm going to do on the table component here is I'm going to filter the data and say if the name is empty, so only show the things where the name is not empty. But because name is optional, let's make it so that ideas is not empty because that's the required field. There we go. So there are our entries. Now, what else can we do here? Well, we have the ideas, we have the name. What if we were to do a little bit of magic with AI? And let's say we're going to generate text. And I'm going to call this the AI emoji column. And I'm going to give it some instructions. So I'm going to say, based on the submitted idea, generate a single emoji to represent the submitted idea, to represent it. So there's my prompt, my instruction. And then I'm going to choose for the input the ideas column. There we go. And so now we just automatically generated an emoji for that. I can also do something else. Let's do AI translation. This is one of my favorite ones. Let's do generate text. Translate the submitted idea into Spanish. And then we'll choose our input again. There we go. Or maybe we want to do, because it's no code north, let's do French. All right. Now we could keep adding a bunch of AI columns, but let's group it. And I can do grouping in columns just by adding a little / in the name. So AI / emoji. Now we're grouping under this header of AI. Great. So that just makes our data a little bit cleaner. Now in the layout, going back to the table here, let's do one more thing. I'm going to add one more AI column. And I'm going to say, summarize the ideas in a single, actually, hold on. Let's call it title. Create a title that summarizes the submitted ideas. Maximum 5 words. Camel case. Let's see what happens. All right. Let's remove the camel case. There we go. That feels a bit better. So this is an example of when you're building your apps in Glide and you're playing around with AI, especially at a data level, being able to quickly iterate and see results in the editor as you're going. So now I have a summary, I have a translation, I have this emoji representing the submitted ideas. And in the table component here, I'm going to add another column. Actually, you know what? Let's do it on the, yeah, let's do another column. And we're going to grab the summary. And we're going to also grab the AI emoji so that and I'm going to remove the ideas body content there. There we go. So now we have this really nice summary of all of the submitted ideas. And last thing, I'm going to sort this. So it's in reverse chronological order. So the most recent stuff is up at the top. There we go. And you can see here when I was talking about buttons and other interactions, by default, when you add a table component or a collection component, you're going to get these buttons added, the ability to add to the collection. I could also do something like a filter. So if I wanted to, or an inline filter. So if we wanted to do something like sorting off the timestamp. So you can imagine if you had, let's say, a category column and all of the suggestions were categorized and you were filtering against the category, you'd be able to toggle that here. Anyway, that's just for purpose of an example. Let's disable these actions. So we don't want folks to be able to submit stuff there. They're going to submit only through the form. Last thing we're going to do is look at how you change single items in a collection and what happens when you do that. So let's go into one of these items here. All right. So we have this title component, which has the name of the person who submitted and what they submitted. Let's clean this up a little bit to make it a bit nicer. I'm going to add a container component here. This is one of my favorite things in Glide, container component. So you got a little bit of styling options here. I want to put the actual submitted content outside of the title component. So I'm going to add that here, rich text. And I can reference that value from our data table. So I'm going to pull in the ideas. And then on the title, I'm going to change this to be the summary and the emoji. So let's change the order of that. There we go. Let's add a space. And then as a subtitle, I'm going to, let's do this, submitted at timestamp. There we go. My rich text component is outside of the container. Let's fix that. There we go. And I'm going to add one more thing just to move the breadcrumb out of that container. There we are. Okay. Let's make that a small spacer. Great. So we just changed the design of this detail screen. And because I changed it in one, it will also update all of the other ones as well. So it's really, really quick to make iterative design changes in your Glide apps when you're working with collections, because at the detail level, any changes you make, it's just going to apply to everything else in that collection. There we go. So that is Glide in a very, very quick nutshell. But let's look at what else we can do. So here I have this app that I've built called the Webflow plus Glide. And the way this thing works is that it allows me to add posts from a Glide app into my Webflow CMS. So how are we doing that? Well, first, I'm going to show you that we can actually embed Glide apps inside of Webflow. So you can embed Glide apps through iframes, and it's really easy to get them running in there, because all we're doing is using a code embed. And in that code embed, we're just referencing the app, adding a little bit of styling, and it shows up and it's fully interactive. So I can interact with the app here, and what I'm actually running is this app that I've built here. Then, and here it is in my CMS. So how are we wiring this all together? So let's take a look at this app in the builder. So what I have is this Webflow posts table. So exact same sort of thing that I had with the demo I just showed before, right? It's just a basic collection of submissions. We have our row ID, the values that we're pulling in. But then I've also added a couple of these other columns that reference the configuration for our API call. And then on the form, exact same way I just showed you how we can bind custom action workflows to, add a timestamp when we submit a form. I have a custom action workflow here that is making an API call to Webflow, so that when I submit something through the app, it shows up in my CMS collection. So what's happening in this workflow? Let's take a look here. So the first thing I do is I set the timestamp, just like we did in that other demo. And then I am making, and you can copy this API key if you want. It's going to be gone by the time it's over. This thing's going to self-destruct. So we have our endpoint, post. So this is all defined in the Webflow API documentation that I referenced somewhere here in one of these tabs. Here we go. So this is one of my favorite things about Glide. So when you're starting to move on to more intermediate use cases, it is a ton of fun to build relatively simple apps very quickly to do a lot of cool stuff when you start interacting with APIs. my background, I'm not a developer. I hate writing code. I've done website stuff for a long time, all self-taught. I love the concept of APIs, the concept of developing custom software. Hate writing code. And that's one of the things I love about Webflow, because I can do the things and apply the knowledge I have about concepts and get great results without having to mess with syntax or code editors or anything like that. And so that applies to working with APIs as well. So I can build these simple applications with clean UI and start tapping into the power of these really robust APIs that are well documented, that are out there. So this particular app, all we're doing is we are saying we're going to add an item unpublished to a CMS collection. That's all we're doing. But you can imagine being able to add more functionality, more callouts, more things that you could do within a Glide app that hits the Webflow API to do things like managing a site, managing publish status, doing all of the things that the Webflow API enables you to do without having to be a developer, but you're still creating that really clean UI for it. So let's look at that action in a little bit more detail here. Okay, so we set the timestamp. We're doing an API call. We have our endpoint. We have the method. These are all defined in the docs. The authorization that we're passing through as a header, the content type, the body that we're sending over, the body of the API request, and then where do we store that response? And all of these things are being cited from that Webflow posts table. And so in the Webflow posts table, you can see I have the content type defined. And all this is something that we call a template column in Glide that allows you to define text. And then if you want, replace values within that text with variables, which is what we're doing here. So this is the body template, the structure that I'm using for the body template. And you can see the whole body argument here, JSON. And I have a few variables, name, slug, body. And then I'm dynamically populating those with the values of these other columns. So the title and the slug and the body, those things I specified when I submitted the form, those are getting stored in the Glide table. And then when that API call is being made, it's grabbing that information and passing it through in the API call. And then when the API call works, you get the response back, which means I now have this application that allows me to submit things to a Webflow CMS without needing to have access to the Webflow CMS. I can do it all through the app. So imagine having an app on your phone that allows you to manage your Webflow site without having to log in to your dashboard or log into the builder or anything like that. That's what's possible when you start wiring things together with the Glide app. So that's what I got. Oh, the one last thing, and if you're wondering, if you haven't played with the API before in Webflow, it's pretty easy to get started. Go into your Webflow site settings, go down into apps and integrations, and you can create an API key, and then use that API key in your API calls. And then if you end up sharing that API key over a live stream, you can just revoke it. All right, and that's what I got. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Anyone in the lodge wants to hop back on, or any questions in YouTube, hit me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how much can you style the actual embed? So for example, I saw that you had a nav bar in the embed. Is there any way to remove that, or are you kind of limited to what Glide allows you to do in the app design process?
Oh, that's yeah, you can totally remove that. So that was me mucking with actually, let me pull that back up. Let's see here. Window, Webflow plus Glide. This should be the right one. All right, so let's take a look here. So I believe the cause of that is because I had multiple screens, so you end up getting that top bar. So I remember testing this yesterday. I don't think I had the header. I have too many tabs. All right, let's go back here. Pages. And then if I change the settings, so I remember I had a setup where I was able to hide. It might take a minute with the caching, but I was able to hide that. You know, you can also do. How did I do that yesterday? I have to double check that. So I know I had this working yesterday where there was no nav, there's no header, no nothing. It might have been some custom CSS, but because we're just loading up through the iframe, it's going to be dependent on what's happening at the Glide app level. So I think I should be able to nuke it even with some custom CSS. But anyway, yeah, good question. Nice hard one to start off.
Had to.
Of course.
Okay, I might have an easier question. I asked in the chat, and I think Jeremy did answer already. But the PWAs for like mobile apps, is there like a control, or is it just like always on by default? Like, is it something that you have to like toggle on so that the PWA is available, or?
It's kind of an inverse where by default all Glide apps are PWAs. So they're progressive web apps. They run on the browser. They don't run natively. They do look and feel like native apps, and you can install them on your home screen, etc. But they start off as PWAs. If you want the iframe embedding enabled, you just reach out to our support team and they can flip that on. So and they still are effectively progressive web apps, but you don't have if the iframe embedding is enabled on an app, it's the way it's rendered is different. So we strip out a bunch of stuff that we include if it's running as a usual Glide app. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's perfect. And then I guess too, then you can like, because you made this one like public, so that, or the app that we tried out earlier, it was like a public application, but you can also have them like password protected, I guess, so that if you did create like a Glide app to edit your CMS, it could be private.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say, so going back to that No Code North suggestions one, I could change it so that it's private and only defined users have access to it, or people on the Glide team that this thing exists in. We can whitelist email domains. We can whitelist emails in a table. We even, for the like higher level plans, the enterprise plans, you can even tie into a single sign-on. So all of these things are available. The other thing you can do is kind of mix and match. So you could have a public app where there's optional sign-in, so you can let your users log in. If I do this, what we'll end up seeing on the front end is something a little bit different. So yeah, so now we have that sign in up at the top. And if I hit that, drop in my email address, checks against the users table. If it exists, it'll send me an authentication pin. Or for authentication, I can also enable sign in with Google, allowing visitors to request access. So there's multiple levels of authentication available. And once you start playing with that, you can also, we didn't really get to it, but the ability at, let's say, a screen level to control visibility based on.
Okay, yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask. Like, yeah, can you like gate specific actions behind different okay, cool.
Yes. Yeah, so kind of give you a quick rundown here. So like that's at a screen level, right? Show the tab when, let's say, user profile role is admin. And then as I preview, it's like, okay, I'm logged in as an admin, but if I log in as anyone, I'm not going to be able to access it. Or if I wanted it to be, I want people to be able to access the tab to submit things. So I'm going to remove this check at that level. I'll let people submit stuff. But that table that shows all of the submissions, I only want that to be visible when the user role is admin. And now, as an administrator, I see it all. But if I'm anybody, I just see the form. So you can start really drilling down, and you can even do it at like the actions level. And you can get really granular.
Cool.
Logan in the chat, access control /auth is elite. Yes, it is. You just got to remember where you've added those and where you haven't added those rules. When you start getting into more complex builds, if you're not documenting what you're doing, you might miss something. It's happened to me a couple times.
Is there like a an icon that gets like enabled, like if you add like in the layout panel where you had the elementary on the side, is there like if you add a visibility or like an off toggle to something, it pops up with like a little icon next to it that's like, oh, this visibility has been toggled or something like that?
There isn't, but that's a really good idea. I'm gonna flip that over to the product team.
Love it. All right. It should be launched by like later this afternoon, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. We're just gonna go live on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, no testing.
Sure.
I have a quick question. What is the most common use case that you've seen people use Glide for in terms of embedding it into Webflow?
So the embedding into Webflow, one of the reasons I wanted to do this this demo is that we don't see enough of it. The embedding capability is there. It's a feature we've had for a very long time, but it's not one that a lot of folks are aware of. And the use case I showed here, where it's like, hey, let's embed an app that lets you control the CMS. It's not a great example, but you can imagine adding other powerful types of apps to a Webflow site. They're all built in Glide, and then they live in Webflow and they interact with your Webflow site. So, for example, let's say you're doing a marketing site and you want to put together a lead gen tool of some kind, doing calculators, quizzes, assessments, like really helpful utility tools that could live on a client's website. Traditionally, that can be pretty complex, but you could put something together in Glide and have this full management experience, embed that on the site, and suddenly you have all this utility that makes the Webflow site more powerful, but you're not having to futz with any code or get too crazy with it. Yeah, I'd love to see more of that.
Makes sense. Thanks.
No worries. Yeah, Logan called out in chat too, client portal. So yeah, so that's another like good one. If you start doing some of the authentication stuff within Webflow, you start putting the stack together, and it's like, here's the things that we can put in our Webflow site. So we have all the benefits of the Webflow experience, plus this other stuff nestled in, and it's an easier approach than some other methods. Any other questions?
This might be going further than we want to talk about, but can you have like, you can have multiple pages in your Glide app, right?
Oh yeah. So if you want to just talk about like multiple screens.
Yeah, like I'm thinking like if I had a couple of tools that I all wanted to like iframe into one Webflow website on like different pages, like on this one I want the client portal, on this one I want a calculator.
Oh yeah.
And then I guess I could all live inside one Glide app, and then I just iframe those different screens into different pages, right?
You could. General best practice with Glide is rather than trying to fit everything into a monolith, create more apps. It's kind of the beauty of it, because then every app they can share data between each other.
Okay.
And then we start getting into the API stuff that you can have just stuff passing back and forth. So yeah, I would do them all separate apps, but yeah, embed them.
All right, and I guess so then you can have the Glide apps, like even though they're separate, they can still like get data and talk to each other.
Yes, yeah, you can share
one parent account.
Exactly, yeah. Within a team, you can share data. They're called linked tables. Actually, let me just talking to someone about this. Linked tables in Glide apps. We have this really good video we published earlier this year talking about how that works. And I'll drop that in the chat here.
Awesome.
So I'm using that a lot for a bunch of apps that we use for our Glide Experts partner program. So in the same way you have like Webflow experts, Glide experts build apps for others. And we have a suite of apps that we use to run the partner program. And there's a bunch of data being shared between those. And it just makes life a lot easier. Anyone else? All right. So the best way to learn Glide is really in our Glide University. And I've mentioned this to a couple of folks in No Code North before, but we do have certifications just like Webflow does. But the way we set up our certifications is that there are learning paths. So as you're going through to complete the certification, we're actually guiding you through a course, different modules, different lessons, and it is a crash course. It's like a Glide boot camp of learning all the fundamentals all the way up through really advanced stuff, getting into AI. There's 3 levels of Glide certification and then an AI certification. Go through, review these, take the courses. You'll get certified and you'll learn a ton really quickly.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, I think that's mostly because Andy just explained it all so clearly, and it all looks to make so much sense, and that was really terrific to learn how to do that. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thanks, Penny. Just one last little shout out I wanted to make. If you're watching and you are building sites for clients and you're curious about Glide and getting into doing app development for clients, Glide Experts program, free to join. It's a great way to just kind of get in there, take the skills you already have as a Webflow developer and apply them into doing business apps and, expand your services and all that fun stuff. So yeah, just hit me up online. Have any questions? I'm in the No Code North Slack as well. So happy to chat.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much once again for showing us how to work with Glide. And I just want to let everybody know that next week on Friday, November 15th, we're going to have another workshop, and this time with Grace Walker from Grace Walker Design. And she's going to be showing us how to work with Visual Electric. If you saw any of her Fast Forward freelance material, I think a lot of people were pretty impressed with the images that she was able to create. And she's going to show us how to use the Visual Electric system to create cool images. So with that, I'd say we're all done, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.